Hello everybody, welcome to my latest video. It's an exciting one this time. I wanted to do a video on the Tomb Kings which I'm working on. It's a really interesting one. It's going to be a slightly different video in terms of the voiceover as well, because I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I was thinking about creating the colour scheme and how we did the painting and everything. A little bit more than actually showing you how the painting, or telling you how the painting was done, because the painting is pretty straightforward from what you can see on the video. I mean, I don't need to commentate and tell you to prime the model black, for instance. So basically, the idea that I had when the Tomb Kings were announced, and I got sent the box very kindly by Games Workshop, thank you very much for that. When it got announced, I was umming and ahhing about whether to do a new scheme or an evolution of my old scheme. So for those of you who don't know, I had the privilege to work at Games Workshop when the original Tomb King book came out. I was one of the few people at head office who actually had a Tomb King army kind of sort of converted up at the time of the first book, because like the models didn't really exist, so you had to do a lot of converting from the rules that were in Ravening Hordes. So I ended up stumbling on. I don't really know why I ended up doing the colour scheme, but I did it. It was dark red and gold, and then like a really warm bone, which kind of came out all right. And then I kind of copied that over and carried it across to some of the character models and things like that. So it was a really simple scheme, because like back in the early 2000s, late 90s, and everything, when I was doing the Tomb Kings, the kind of the style and the paint jobs that you would see on armies tended to be very simple anyway. So the very simple dark red and gold was very of its time, sort of thing. So when the new Tomb Kings came out, absolutely buzzing to be able to get my hands on like my beloved Tomb Kings again, so I get a second chance at creating my army. And I couldn't decide. I was having this conversation on Twitch quite a lot. I couldn't decide whether to do a new scheme or like evolve my old scheme. So if there was a couple of ideas, like maybe I could go for a new scheme which would be a blue or a turquoise or something like that. I really wanted to shift a little bit away from the turquoise though, because turquoise was in my opinion going to be used a lot by everybody. So everybody was going to do like a turquoise, yellow, blue, and then a little bit of red, because that's very kind of Egyptian, just as a base. So I wanted to kind of shift away from that, and ultimately I decided to go and kind of evolve and like think about what my colour scheme would be like now, if I did it now, compared to what it was back when I first did it, this dark red. So I was trying to come up with a nice red. The red that I eventually went for was a very cold red, so you'll see how we do that later on. But then I also had to try and find a balance for the bone as well. Now when I did the bone initially, it was incredibly simple, but then it took forever. So it was a white primer, and then it was an old paint called Snakebite Leather, which is now a contrast paint. It was thinned down snakebite leather, washed all over it to give the kind of warm bone tone, and then it was Screaming Skull and Skull White for the highlights. So what we've done here is we've kind of shifted it a little bit. I've tried to keep a little bit of the warmth for the bone. So as you saw just a second ago, this is Morghast bone with a little bit of Mornfang brown mixed into it, just for a little bit of warmth in the shadows, and that's kind of scratched on all over the place. Now scratching it on helps to create a little bit of texture on the bone. It gives you some just interest all over the bone surface, rather than it being nice and smooth. So ultimately at the end it looks really cool and really kind of tattered and weathered, which is great. And then you take the Morghast bone, you highlight it up like this, same thing, because sort of same kind of scratchy technique, and then a Screaming Skull and a white highlight. So the top two highlights are pretty much accurate to what I used to do, or what I did back in the original codex or the original army book, and how my army used to look. And in fact I managed to get hold of 8 of my old skeletons. I'll put some pictures up in a bit, but I managed to get hold of 8 of my old skeletons, so it's actually really nice to kind of put the evolutions and see what the two models are like comparatively next to each other. So the that bone, like I say, I wanted to try and keep the warmth of that bone, but also just tie a little bit into it. So what I decided to do is get some Corvus black as well. Now Corvus black, it's a really nice black, and it's got a little bit of cold blue in it as well. And although I didn't really want to use any turquoise on the armour in terms of like armour plating or anything, I thought if I could use just like a little bit off gold and do kind of like a coppery bronze colour, then I can patina it with the turquoise, and that's where you can get like the stereotypical turquoise colour in and into the army. So that was the idea. We were going to try and shift the turquoise colour into like an almost a spot colour for the army and make it kind of stand out like that. Just quickly mentioning on the stuff that's actually happening on the video at the moment. So this is the sort of the final highlight, which is Screaming Skull, and again we're kind of scratching it on, but I'm paying attention to where the highlights are going to be, like the very, very hot spots. So I wanted to do the part of the skull that is very, very visible over any shields or anything that he might be holding up in front of his body, like this. So you're going to have a hot spot on the top of the forehead, and then any tops of the bone again which are visible. So you got that little kneecap there, the top of the femur, the top of the top of the arm, and then few little ribs which are poking out, just making sure they're nice and bright, just to kind of draw attention and clean it up like that. And ultimately, this, although I wanted to very much make sure I was doing like kind of doing my old scheme, making it proud sort of thing, doing my old making my old scheme as best as I could, like an evolution of it. I didn't really want to rush it, so I wanted to do it as best as I could, but within a reasonable amount of time. So I mean, obviously, when you're painting skeletons, you've got a lot of skeletons to paint, and I think I've done a good 60 now. So I've done a good 60 skeletons, and then I've done a couple of bone dragons, which are mostly there. They need a few more highlights. I've done a Screaming Skull catapult. I've got a casket of souls and everything. So I've done a lot of bone, and it is quite quick to do. This skeleton, although it is sped up, this skeleton took me an hour. So an hour for a skeleton, from start to finish, with all the armor, all the weapons and the patina and everything, I don't think it's too bad. The archers are taking a little bit longer because they've got sort of a little bit more detail to kind of pick out. Yeah, I've not done any Tomb Guard yet, but we'll see about that. Yeah, I don't think an hour per skeleton for like my beloved army was that bad, to be honest. I thought that was going to be okay, and I've done a lot of them on stream as well, so kind of chattering away to lots of viewers while I'm painting is quite good fun. And it's not like it's challenging work. One thing that you can't quite see, because I've sped up the video here, is how slow my paintbrush tends to be moving. I am trying to be just a little bit slower with the paintbrush than you would expect, trying to get the marks in the right place, trying to get them scratchy and make the pooling of the paints in the correct spot. For instance, when you're highlighting, you make sure that pool is pooling at the top of the highlight rather than at the bottom, and things like that. But the copper, I think, was the big shift away from my old scheme. I think my old scheme, because it had the very dark gold, I think, and of course gold doesn't really patina, you don't get any oxidation on gold, so it has to be, you have to shift it a little bit away from gold. And I think this copper from Scale Colour is, I mean, the Scale Colour metallics are fantastic anyway, but the copper in particular, I was really looking for an excuse to use it. I tried to do a Custodes colour scheme a while ago with copper, and I just kind of shifted it a little bit too far and it looked a bit too much like gold, so maybe I'll try that again at some point. But I thought it was a perfect opportunity to try this copper on the Tomb Kings as well. And then of course, once you've done the copper or the bronze, coppery, bronzy, brassy, whatever colour, the patina then doesn't look out of place. So, I was saying earlier, I thought it was quite important to try to get a little bit of the turquoise in there. I just didn't want too much of the turquoise around. So we've got the copper that's going on is old copper from Scale Colour. It goes on really, really nicely. You would probably want to thin it just a little bit. When you're applying metallics with the paintbrush like this, I mean, this is quite a new paintbrush as well. You want to lubricate the paint and lubricate the metallic flecks in the paint a little bit more than you would expect, because the metallic flecks do cut the bristles on they cut the surface of the bristles, sort of thing. So you end up with tattered bristles, which the paint ultimately then doesn't fall off very, very well. So you want to lubricate it and water it down just a little bit, just to help it come off the brush nice and easily. Generally you want to have your brush moving a little bit slower when you're putting on metallic, so you're not adding too much friction. But there was a way, there's like an order. I had a few plans in my head, just kind of planning out the order of operations on how and what needed to be painted at certain points. So for instance here we're getting the red on here now first, before we start doing the patina on the gold, and before we start doing a wash. We're going to put a wash on the bone as well, and the Corvus black that goes on the bone, you can also try once this colour scheme gets advanced and like evolved into some of the character models as well, you can start bringing the Corvus black into the patina turquoise as well, so you kind of get that little bit of tie together across all the shadow tones on the model as well, which is rather nice. So this is Galvorback Burgundy. It's a really, really nice base tone for a red, and it's quite contrasty. So once you've got the next red on there as well, you get a nice contrast with the Galvorback in the shadows. I really wanted to try and keep this a cold tone, a little bit of a colder red. So we use Corvus black now, so there's another reason why you get the colder red. So the colder red we're going to do is Corn red and then Wazdaka red. So those two are the two colder reds from Games Workshop, as opposed to Mephiston red and Evil Sun Scarlet. You could probably go Corn red and then Evil Sun Scarlet as well, and you can get a little bit even more contrast between the shadows and the highlights, because obviously Evil Sun Scarlet is a little bit warmer than Wazdaka red, so you could get that way if you wanted to. Anyway, that's beside the point. The Corvus black here, I'm just using it to enhance a little bit of the shadow and the dirt area. There was a image that I found that was some old bone that was in a desert. It was like a skull of an elephant or something, I don't know. But it was a big skull in a desert, and it had lots of dark grey shadows on the bone, and I wanted to try and incorporate that a little bit. And also it then ties the shadow colour into the shadow colour that you end up doing with the red as well, and also with the patina. So I just thought it would be quite a nice way of tying everything together, and also it works really well on the Bone Dragon. So the Bone Dragon is such a large model. You want a lot of tonal variation across the bones, and like the head of the Bone Dragon is very, very large, so you want a lot of tonal variety across there. Not so much on the skeletons, but if you can get a little bit in on the skeletons. And the way I was trying to paint them, with the hotspots up around the head and the shoulders, and then everything else kind of dying off as you go further down the model, I thought you can kind of get away with a bit more of this Corvus black everywhere else. So Corvus black glazing in, it's probably about 60% water, or 6 parts water to 1 part paint, not 60%, sorry, 6 part water to 1 part paint, so it's quite thin. It's a quite thin glaze, and then once you've got it on your brush, wipe a lot of it off so there's just a little bit left, and then you can just kind of glaze that into shadows. And it also helps soften some of the texture that you've been adding on as well. So because the texture has been scribbled on quite a lot, you can soften a lot of that in the shadows as well. And then there's 2 highlights that go on this. So there's Screaming Skull and then White. So you go back with the Screaming Skull again, just to pick out anything that you might have slipped over. So things like teeth, top of the eyebrows, things like that. And then we get the red. I really do like the red. I love the way the red has come out. It took me a while. Like I say, I did try a warmer red with the Mephiston red, but with the copper it just didn't quite work, particularly once you got the turquoise on there as well. It was just a little bit too close in tone to the copper. So the colder corn red and Wazdaka red just really worked, I thought. And then keeping the bottom of the shield dark as well, again for that contrasty look. It keeps the interest up towards the top as well, gives a little bit of a focal point, gives something interesting that's happening on the shield, because otherwise the shield just ends up with just a big red block, which is not just distracting, it just looks a little bit dull. So this is a little bit of artistic license and a little bit of a rule of cool of what might look good, and we're trying to keep things at the top a little bit lighter, so you've got the skull that is very bright up there as well, so I thought I would try and carry that on across to the shield as well. Making sure I'm trying to keep all the lines vertical, all the brush strokes vertical, and then you can blend across the transitions as well with a few vertical lines which are stretching out into across the transitions as well, just to help a little bit of that. And there's a little bit of a ribbon on the weapon that is picked out in red as well. Now the weapons are actually from the they're from the Tomb King sprue, so you get a sprue with a handful of like these hand weapon capeches on it, within the Tomb King army box and within the Tomb King skeleton armor, skeleton warrior box as well. But you don't get like a full unit's worth, so you don't get 20 for instance. Now what I did is I shamelessly went onto eBay and just grabbed a load more, so I have an entire, I think it's 25 models, 25 with these kind of capeches. You also get some in the chariot sprue as well. So I was able to just grab a load from eBay for they weren't too bad actually, they weren't too bad in terms of how much they were, but I grabbed a load of that, and then because I wanted to, it was one of the things I wanted to do. My original models, which you might remember from earlier in the video, had metal capeches, which Games Workshop never released. They were I found them down on the factory floor when we were doing you could do a staff pick where you're walking around picking parts that you wanted. So I grabbed all my old original Tomb Kings had capeches, so I wanted to have at least some capeches on the hand weapon, and then I've also got the spear, the unit of spearmen. They use the Tomb Guard spear as well, just because I really wanted to shift everything as far as I could towards the Egyptian Tomb King look, whereas the skeleton warriors kit themselves when you're doing the Tomb Kings, and if you get the box set themselves, they use just the regular skeleton spears, and they don't quite, I mean, you can paint them up and they look quite good if you paint them up in the same scheme, but ultimately I think like just pushing it as far as I could into the Egyptian style I just really liked. Now this is the this is the oxidation phase, if you like. This is blue-green, Vallejo blue-green, and you thin it down. I tend to have two pools of this on the wet palette when I'm doing it. One is really thin, and then the other one is not so thin. So one's probably, I don't know, 8 parts water to 1 part paint, and then the other one is probably 4 parts water to 1 part paint. And one of the things that you can do, you will have seen when I was doing the underneath of the shield, wet the area that you want it to run into, and then if you touch it, capillary action will run it and pull it all the way across that area. So if you're trying to do a line in a particular spot, for instance underneath the trim on the shield, if you run your brush underneath there and wet all of that, and then touch the brush again with some of the verdigris, the blue-green paint, watered down, then it will just run into that area as well, which is really, really good. But it does take a couple of applications because it will dry, and mainly what I was doing with that is it also takes away a lot of the gloss as well. So the gloss finish of the copper, it pulls that away, and then it allows you to play a little bit more with the highlights, because once you highlight back on top with the copper, because everything else is already matted down, because it's had this massive wash of the verdigris all over the top of it, the highlights will pop a little bit more, and they look really, really good. And also when you transfer that and elaborate it and push the scheme further for the character models as well, that works really, really well for the character models, because you can very much pop the metallics as well. But you'll see one of my Tomb Kings later on, and I tend to paint, when I do true metallics, I tend to paint them when I'm trying to do them at a slightly higher level. I tend to paint them with the same principle as non-metallics, so the same highlight placements and things, and it just looks really good. And the matte base tone of the metallic really helps with that, because it's not competing. The metallic flecks aren't then competing in the shadows, which is really cool. So that is the verdigris all dried and all kind of settled, and then we're just going to go back in. You will have seen me go back in with some white as well, just to kind of finally pick out some of the a select few teeth, a couple of the the two eyebrows, if you like, and then a little spot on the forehead, and it just pushes a little bit more of the contrast and gives you a focal point up at the top. So this is the final few touches for the red. It's Wazdaka red, and then the last one is Wild Rider red. Wild Rider red is this final highlight here, and trying to keep this very much towards the top, and any creases or cuts in the shield as well, just helps pick it out and gives it some hot spots up at the top, and also gives it a bit of a focus as well. It's quite nice. I'm very, very much a fan of how this red has turned out. It's totally not my normal way of doing red, which is also quite nice as well, because it makes the Tomb Kings just that little bit more unique across all my painting as well. And I'm loving it. So this is, as you can see here, so this is where the matte finish on the metallics really starts showing off when you start highlighting it, because you can very much see the shine when you're going through, and this is very kind of tip-tappy highlighting on the metallic. You don't have to be particularly neat, you just kind of have to pick an area that you want to have in the brightness, and then just tap away, and it will wear out a little bit of the verdigris as well, and just makes it look really, really cool. So make sure you're picking out things like rivets. They're obviously easy ones, and you can leave a lot of the oxidation in a lot of the areas which are the moisture would kind of settle in. You can leave a lot of that really, really green. So like the back of that collar, for instance, is very, very green already, and just kind of left there. So this is I believe this is just the old copper again, but then after the old copper you go back in with some pure copper, just to kind of really pop the final highlights as well. So it's a 3-stage, if you like, 3-stage copper, but only using 2 colours. And here's the pure copper, so this is the final highlight on the pure copper. And then when you do the characters, I go all the way up to chrome with the characters as well. So I go a few more steps, but that's characters. You can add more steps and more, or even less steps if you want to do. You don't have to do all the steps on any of these. If you wanted to do, go straight to the pure copper from the old copper verdigris. And then the same with the bone as well. If you wanted to skip a couple of these stages on the bone, then feel free. It takes a stage out, but I didn't think an hour for a skeleton was too bad. Like I say, I've got 60 of them pretty much done. There's a few that would need their final highlights, but they're all looking pretty good. My next lot of skeletons are going to be the archers, which hopefully you'll see in the video for. We did some custom archers with their asp bows, which look really, really good. So that's one of my next things to do. One of the things that I was quite pleased about with the colour scheme as well is that it does transfer over to things like the war machines and the war engines. I've got the Casket of Souls, which is currently on the go, and just pulling out the red and the copper, and then the bone tone as well, pulling those out and applying them to things like the Screaming Skull Catapult and the Casket of Souls really works very well. I'm quite excited to convert up a bone giant at some point. That'll be really, really interesting because I want to do the classic pose that Paul Dayton drew in the original army book. I thought that would be really, really good. And yeah, as soon as that gets finished, you can yeah, I will definitely be doing a video on that one because that's going to be quite converted up because I want to try and get that pose. Is going to be quite a long way. Right, so I've had lots of questions about how I did the bases for the Tomb Kings, and here it is. It is incredibly easy. It is Vallejo Desert Sand texture paste. I've got a few of these pots of the Vallejo texture paste. I find it really good. It's a very good basing substance as well because it's got some adhesion as well, so you can add things to it and it will glue the bits on that you want to put on. It's a little bit tricky and messy to work with, so as you can see here it's getting a little bit fiddly. I do tend to prefer using one of these kind of little spatula coffee stirrer sticks. I've got a load of these, absolute loads of these. I got them from IKEA a while ago, but so you can use this to kind of flatten them all down, apply it on quite nicely. This is probably the better way if you've got the model separate from the base. If you haven't got the model separate from the base, you can use a brush, and you've just got to be a little bit more difficult because it's not quite as easy to kind of push in around the feet as it is when the base is free like this. So you can apply it on like this, and then while it's drying, you've got quite a while for it to dry, and you can kind of push and pull it around and manipulate some of the almost like sand dune waves, if you like, that's created as you're putting it on. So you can just kind of push some of them around, make sure they're all pointing in the right direction. It's not that much of a big deal really, but if you want to push your basing, if you're doing like a big display piece, then you can make sure that all the little bumps and everything are in the right direction and exactly how you want them to. And then one of the things towards the front, I'll try to kind of blend in a little bit of crackle paint as well, and to do that I'll just kind of remove some of the texture paint as well to create an area to put the crackle paint down. Now the crackle paint I use is the Agralan Earth from Games Workshop. This is categorically the best crackle paint you can get. There are crackle pastes, there are crackle paints from everywhere else, however they do not crack at the same scale as the Games Workshop one does. I don't know what Games Workshop have done to their crackle paint, but you get finer cracks and more in-scale cracks with this than you do with any other crackle paint on the market, in my opinion. So I would always recommend. I think I've got 3 of these because I was terrified that Games Workshop were going to kind of stop making it or something. So I've got 3 of these. So if areas which are a little bit thinner with the texture paste is where I tend to put this on. It will crack up, and this is the best way, in my opinion, to get the crackle paint onto a base. You can put it on like raw on a base, but then it will very, very easily flake off. If you put it on over a very, very thin layer of this texture paste, it has something to grip onto. Yeah, it just deals really well with that. So this is how I tend to do it. It's obviously it's a lot easier if you're using like black, or you're going to prime the paint afterward, prime the base afterwards. But this is the Tomb King kind of scheme, and it sort of works really well. It gives a little bit of variation, colour variation to the base as well. These are so I've got some sharp sand, some builder's sand from a builder's merchant, and sieved it all out and separated the different sizes and everything. So these are some of the larger stones from the sand, and just kind of pick a few of those up which look the right tone, the right colour. I don't want anything that's too black. Don't want anything that's too kind of well, the pale stuff would look all right, but I wanted angular stones basically rather than round ones. And then get a little bit of sand, and then just scatter the sand on certain areas as well. And you can put the sand on the crackle paste as well. Looks really good, ties it in. It's the transitions between the texture and the crackle. You want to kind of pay attention a little bit to those, and that's basically it. So that's the base, all kind of sorted out and finished. What I did when I did my Tomb Kings is I got all the bases. I actually had to clean this one off because I didn't have a spare base to redo a base, so I pulled all of this texture off a already done base and then redid it for you for this video. So there, and that's what it looks like when it's done. So you got a little bit of crack on there. You can take the skeleton off the base. Yeah, so I did all 60 or however many bases you get in the Tomb King army box. I did all of those all at once, yeah, they're all done, and then I just kind of go through and pick one of them which is appropriately the right size, or has got the right gaps for where the feet need to sit. Now, one of the things that you will notice about this when we glue it on is the bottom of the feet look very black. Now that's because his feet were obviously they were in the blue tack when I was painting it, and here are just some of the other bases which I've been painting as well, or I've done. So that one with the skull, actually, so when you're adding skulls to your bases, make sure you clip your skulls in half, so that one, like the back of the skull, is being clipped off so that it looks like it's settling into the sand a little bit more. Don't just put your skulls just resting on top of the sand. They need to settle in the sand, so clip them down, cut a little bit of them off. That's probably the best way of getting those down. But that's just some of the other bases that I've done. I've done loads of them, and then once you've kind of painted all your skeletons, or they're all primed or anything, so I tend to prime them all and then pick a base and stick them onto it. The super glue is not running out of this one at all, and yeah, so grab a base once the model is primed. I did paint all my other skeletons. I painted them on the bases once they've been primed. So prime them black, stick them on the base, and then you can start with the Mournfang Brown and Morghast Bone, base tones and everything. And then one of the things as well, it just helps a little bit, is that I throw a little bit of activator on there as well, accelerant, and that will turn the super glue just a little bit white. And then once we get to the glazing section in a second, the white will just help kind of make that join invisible. But there we go. So that's a skeleton all sitting nicely on his base, and he's ready for a little bit of a glaze. Now the glaze we're going to do, it's just going to be Balor Brown, and this goes just basically all over the base, and it just helps soften the transition between some of the colours. A Balor Brown is very high. It seems to be a very high pigment base, so this is very, very thin. And what you end up finding is that you will thin it down on your wet palette. You'll come to add it to the base, add a bit to the base, and then you can instantly go back and grab some water and just kind of thin it down even further as it's on the base. But you can also see here I'm kind of not being particularly careful around the feet as well, and covering up some of the black around the edge of the feet. Now I do go back in afterwards and just put a little bit of Mournfang Brown around the bottom of the feet as well, just to hide the black a bit more. But the most important bit here, as you can see, is just getting the edges and making sure that the edges have got that Balor Brown, because you don't want the edges to be it'll be a very kind of harsh line of, oh, it's just the normal colour from the texture paint rather than the Balor Brown kind of glaze. So wash this all over, sit there like that, and work across the transitions into the crackle paint and over the sand. It just kind of pulls the sand and pulls everything into the same tone. It just looks, I just think it looks great, and en masse these just look brilliant. And here are some, in fact. So we got some of them here. So this is the one that we've just done, and the base is all dry now. There's one which is slightly, this one is slightly back, so we've not quite done the white highlights on that one yet, or we haven't done the Balor Brown either. But that's another one that's all finished. And then that's one with the spear. So we got the Tomb Guard spear on those ones, and then I've got loads. So I've thrown in quite a lot of Tomb King armor all around the place. So that's some armor from the War Sphinx kit, and that is again, I think that's the Tomb Guard standard, which I've just thrown into a regular Tomb King skeleton warrior unit just to kind of increase that. I've got some Ashabti, which I've actually done an Ashabti standard bearer, which just makes the unit look amazing. And yeah, I think it's looking great. I'm very, very pleased with the scheme anyway, and I think it's a very nice kind of evolution of what my old scheme would look like now. And then this is how it transfers then onto a character as well, and you can put a lot more refinement and a few more steps and stages into characters. You can see the copper here goes up to silver. It's a very, very kind of sharp highlight on some of the copper areas, just to kind of pop it even more and give it a bit more detail. I put some work into the characters and everything. The green glow is not totally finished yet, as you can see, because at the moment it's just looking glowy as opposed to, well, it's just looking bright green as opposed to a bit of a glowy. But yeah, there we go. Hope you enjoyed that one. If you got any questions, then please drop them down below in the comments. And I hope you have enjoyed finding out how I've done all my Tomb Kings. I'm absolutely loving them. I've got lots more to do. I've got lots more ideas to do. I do need to finish my 2 bone dragons. I think they're looking amazing. And then we've got the Screaming Skull catapult, and I can't wait to do the casket. So thank you very much, everybody. As always, drop me a like and a subscribe. That would be much appreciated. And I will see you on Twitch at chrisfrossin.tv, twitch.tv/chrisfrossin, and Twitter and Instagram as always. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care. Bye bye.